Language and Cultural Studies at Green University of Bangladesh in Dhaka. Professor Saha has authored over 50 research papers published in reputed national and international journals. He is the author of the acclaimed book Cultural Aspirations of Future India of Vivekananda Tagore, which has been translated into 5 major European languages: Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, and Italian. He has also co-edited the volume Cybercrimes and Environmental Sustainability in India. An active contributor to the academic publishing, Professor Saha has served as associate editor of the International Journal of Humanities in USA and as a reviewer for the ETKI journal published from Turkey. His academic expertise has also been recognized through his association with several universities as a member of boards of research studies, postgraduate boards of studies, and syllabus committees, including Bankura University, Vidyasagar University, Mahatma Gandhi University, and Vishwabangla Vishwavidyalaya. Professor Saha is also an assessor for the NAC peer team, contributing to quality assurance and institutional accreditation in higher education. His distinguished academic career continues to be marked by significant contributions to research, curriculum development, academic leadership, and the preservation and promotion of endangered languages and cultural heritage. With these words of introduction, I warmly invite Professor Apurba Saha to take over the session and deliver his lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Subranil. And am I audible? The very common question, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, but your voice is very low. It's quite low.
Thank you, Subranil. Good evening, everybody. And it's my pleasure to have been invited by the School of Humanities and Social Sciences of the Haldia Institute of Technology, which is under the aegis of iCare, for this online faculty development program titled Thriving Together, Communication, Mental Wellness, and Collaborative Excellence in Higher Education. I'd like to thank the authorities and the management of iCare, the faculty members of School of Applied Sciences and Humanities, Haldia Institute of Technology. Special thanks to Dr. Meenakshi De and Dr. Jyoti Dole, the coordinators of this FDP, respected other faculty members, and respected participants from different colleges. Right. Now, since this is an FDP, Faculty Development Program, all of you are esteemed teachers of different institutes or colleges or universities, and therefore this is not like something, a lecture. Rather, I would prefer to say that it is something like sharing the experiences. Maybe because I am a bit older than you, much more aged than you, so maybe that I've got some more experiences because of my exposure to the subject for long, and therefore I'll be sharing my views with you, and at the same time I'll be enriched from your suggestions and opinions towards the end of the session. So before or without much ado, let me introduce on what I'll be talking, and I'll ask Subranil to present the slides when I just request you to do the slides. So Subranil, just put on the first slide, right?
Sure, sir.
So I'll be basically talking on understanding the basics of learner-centered communication. The basics of learner-centered communication. The title of the total program is Thriving Together, communication, mental wellness, and collaborative excellence in higher education. So I'll try to concentrate on learner-centered communication. Okay, move on to the next slide. Now, there has always been a tension between subject-centered view and learner-centered view of language teaching. Now, the proponents of subject-centered view of language learning is essentially the mastering of a corpus of knowledge, whereas the learner-centered view language acquisition as a process of acquiring skills rather than a corpus of knowledge. Next slide, right? Because this is not very important. Acquiring skills, this is very important. And whenever we talk of any language in a classroom situation, that is whenever we talk of a teaching learning situation or a teaching learning situation, we actually, or rather our main objective is to develop the 4 skills among the participants or the learners, that is LSRW, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So the basic purpose of these classes is to develop the skills of the language, be it English, be it Bangla, be it German, be it Spanish, be it Russian, whatever the case. Whenever we are in a class, in a language class, our basic intention is to develop the 4 skills of the students. Now, learner-centered language teaching developed with the birth of communicative language teaching, which often we refer to as CLT in short. Now, the basic principle of communicative approach is that learners must learn, or rather learners must not only learn to produce grammatically acceptable statements, not only to learn the grammatically acceptable statements, but must also develop the ability to use language for practical purposes. Not only to produce grammatically acceptable statements. Now, this is very important in language-centered teaching or learning. Acceptable sentences. Right from our childhood days, most of us, when we have read in the schools, in the primary level or the secondary levels, our teachers emphasized on grammatically correct sentences, Now, modern linguistics or modern grammar says that it is acceptable. There is a difference between grammatically correct and acceptable. Acceptable sentences mean those sentences which are used by the native speakers. They may not be, according to the grammatical terms, may not be grammatical. For example, if you take any standard grammar book, be it by Wren or by Greenbaum, and if I say a statement like this, that it's me, if I say a statement, it's me, which you will find that almost all the native speakers of English, be they from America, be they from Canada, be they from New Zealand or England, all the native speakers of English will say it's me. But a hardcore grammarian will say, no, it's me is grammatically wrong. It should be it's I, because the basic form of the sentence is I am, it is. And the nominative case should be I. Me can never take the position of the subject. Me is not in the nominative case. But we say it's me. Sorry, me should come in the objective case. There's been obviously a shift. So it's me is acceptable. According to the grammarians, hardcore grammarians, it is not acceptable. It is ungrammatical. But any native speaker of English will use it's me. So it's acceptable. So nowadays we prefer the term acceptable. Therefore, the intention or our purpose should be to, so that the learners learn to produce grammatically acceptable statements, and at the same time they should be able to use language for practical purposes. For practical purposes. I have learned the language not only for my classroom and for my exams. I'll have to use the language in situations outside the classroom, in the marketplace, at the railway station, at the bus stop, at the grocery shop, and everywhere. So this is what we should try to develop among the learners. Now, learner-centered language teaching developed, I've told you, with the birth of CLT, Community Language Teaching. And Chomsky, in 1957, came out with his famous syntactic structures. Syntactic structures, this is a book which has changed the concept of grammar during the 20th century, or has changed the concept of grammar that we have been practicing for the last 200 years. So in syntactic structures, he states that the current standard structural theories of language, were incapable of accounting for the fundamental characteristics of language. The fundamental characteristics, that is creativity. Creativity is one of the most important features of language. And by the way, when I talk of language, when it's a language, language is only with us, with the humans. No other species on earth has language, but each and every species has their own means of communication. And language is obviously a means of communication. It is a mode of communication. Our mode of communication is language, but each and every species on earth have their own means of communication. So there is a difference between the animal communication system and the human communication system. Our communication system is language. So when I say language, it means it is exclusively our property. And creativity is one of the most important features of language. So Chomsky says that these non-structural theories of language, they were not being able to explain this creative nature of the creativity of language. The British applied linguists, they emphasized another fundamental dimension of language, the functional and communicative potential of language. They emphasized on the need to focus in language teaching on communicative proficiency rather than on mere mastery of structures. So not only the mastery of structures, which at least people of my age had done during our childhood days. We were taught to be masters of the structures through a process of drill. By regular practicing, we are given some sentences which we had to translate it into English, or sometimes we are given tasks to just change the voice or change the narration and all these things. So these were a sort of drill practice for the mastering of the structures, which most of us, that is people of my generation and even senior to me, they have practiced this method. Now, the British linguist, next slide. The British linguist D.A. Wilkins, in 1972, he proposed a communicative definition of language that serves as a basis for developing communicative syllabuses for language teaching. Development of communicative syllabus for language teaching. Therefore, the way the syllabus will be designed will help the learners and the students to develop some skills of communication. Here describe two types of meanings: the notional categories and the communicative functions, categories of communicative functions. Now these notional categories, they included concepts like time, quantity, location, etc. And categories of communicative functions, they included areas like requests, complaints, offers, and the like. But both American and British linguists see it as an approach that aims to, number one, make communicative competence the goal of language teaching, and number two, develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills: that acknowledge the interdependence of language and communication. So the first aim or the major objective is to make communicative competence the goal of language teaching. Communicative competence, this is very important. Communicative competence is very important. I know a lot of things, but I can't communicate. Then my learning of the language has failed because I have not been able to develop the basic skill of the language, because the basic skills of the language are concerned with the four skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So if I cannot speak, if I cannot communicate, I fail in my approach. So the syllabus to be designed in such a manner so that such things develop, so that I can communicate, and it should develop my communicative competence. And the second aim is to develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills. Develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills. Now, this is also important because until the teacher or the facilitator, nowadays we prefer the term facilitator, we do not say teacher for language teaching. So the facilitator, which in the common sense is the teacher. So the facilitator or the teacher must be aware. That means he is the person responsible for the development of the skills. So he will teach the skills in such a manner that the skills develop among the students. So the whole thing should be centered around the learner. It should be learner-centered approach. For the teaching of the four language skills that acknowledge the interdependence of language and communication. The interdependence of language and communication. Because language is the means of communication. And I've told you that we only have language on this earth. If time permits, I will talk about the features of language later on if time permits. For example, you see, long back, some millions of years back, we also didn't have language. Humans also did not have language. It has developed and evolved over millions of years. So at that point of time, we used to communicate, and we have our own means of communication, like making some sounds, maybe making some sounds from the top of a hillock, or maybe lightning something, putting fire onto the say fallen dry leaves to communicate to the community. So these were our modes of communication. So we also did not have language right from day one. So it has developed and evolved through millions of ages. And therefore, language and communication, they're interdependent. And the facilitator or the teacher of the language should try to help the learners. I would prefer the term help the learners, because nowadays we do not use the term teach. So try to create an atmosphere and environment in such a way so that these skills develop among the learners, so that the skills of communication develop among the learners. Now, communicative language teaching, CLT, broadly aims to apply the theoretical perspective of the communicative approach by making communicative competence the goal of language teaching. Communicative competence should be the goal of language teaching. That is, I do not simply master the structures of the language. I simply do not know the rules of the grammar, the rules of the language, that is the grammar, but I can use them and apply them when and when necessary. And obviously, language is needed in the outside scenario more in the society than in the classroom. We use language everywhere. The use of language in the classroom is limited, and our target should be to develop the skills among the learners in such a way so that they can communicate in different situations. So this should be the goal. Now, during the last 30 to 40 years, the communicative task has evolved as an important component within curriculum planning, implementation, and evaluation. This is equally important. Curriculum planning, implementation, and evaluation. Those who are a bit senior, like me, or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years junior to me, and those who are senior to me, they obviously know that at one point of time in our state, we had changed the pattern of English teaching and learning, and the government had introduced functional approach in the schools with changing of the textbooks. I still can recall the name of the textbooks at the secondary level, the government schools. But the basic approach was functional approach, where it is supposed that the learners will be able to deal with various situations. They are given situations and they're asked to develop or produce sentences of that situation so that they can use the language in day-to-day life. But the drawback was that this was the plan, but the syllabus was designed, but the drawback was at the level of implementation. At the level of implementation, until and unless the facilitators or the teachers, until and unless they are taught, they're trained, the system will fail. And you all know that that system has failed. The planning was fine to introduce functional approach so that the learners learn to use the language in situations, but it failed because of the lack of implementation. The teachers or the facilitators, they were not trained how to use it, how to apply it, how to train the students. They were not trained, and for that reason as well. Therefore, this curriculum planning, that is important, but even more important is implementation. Implementation is important. And next comes the question of evaluation. Whenever we are evaluating a student, as a teacher, I'm supposed to study that what is the cause of that error. I'm supposed to analyze the error. I will have to see that why he has committed that error. It may be a case of overgeneralization. In many cases, it may be a case of fatigue, but it may be a case of overgeneralization also. For example, suppose I give examples like to a learner when I'm trying to introduce the tense, the past and the present. So I give examples like dance, danced, play, played. And after giving such examples where we have the general rules of the transformation of the present to past, play, played, dance, danced, laugh, laughed, and then ultimately, suddenly I give him run, and the learner writes run. It should have been ran, I know, but the learner doesn't know. Now, the learner has committed this error, but as a teacher, I am supposed to try to analyze that is it actually an error from his side? No, it's not an error. It may be a case of overgeneralization, but for the morpheme run or for the word run, whenever it is transformed to past, it becomes ran. Now, this is what the student will have to memorize. This doesn't come under the general formula. So it is not such an error for the child, because the child is actually trying to formulate the rules of the language. Now, this is what the child does. Whenever a child is learning a language, the child is actually trying to formulate the rules of the language. We acquire language in this way. Language acquisition is an automatic process, and the child tries to incorporate the rules of his or her language, and by the time the child is 9 or 10 years old, the child has actually internalized all the rules of his language, which is or her language, which we call grammar. Because you see, a native speaker never speaks wrong in his mother tongue or her mother tongue. But you see, there are a lot of grammatical processes involved in it. For example, if I give you an example from Bangla, so in Bangla we say Ami. Yes, I think someone wants to say something. Maybe I can take your question at the end of the session if it's okay. I can take it at the end.
I think somebody has turned on their mic. Dr. Indranil, please mute yourself.
Maybe Dr. Indranil, I can take your question at the end of the session. If you could just mute your speaker, then it would be comfortable for me to carry on. Yeah, thank you. So I was trying to say that suppose I give some examples from Bangla, right? In Bangla, I say, Ami khai, tumi khao, she khai. So look at the change of the verb forms. Now, why do these forms change? These forms change because of the subject. Again, if I change the tense, they also change. Ami khabo, tumi khabe. So with the change of the tense, the verb form also changes. Now, and so-called ordinary illiterate man who doesn't know anything, who can't even write owa koko, a man who is working in the fields, he correctly says that Ami khai, tumi khao. Ami khabo, tumi khabe. He or she doesn't know that what is tense and what is subject, but he never commits this mistake because he has internalized the rules of his or her language. So right from the childhood, to be more precise, right from after birth, the child has been trying to internalize the rules within himself or herself. And by the time the child is 9 or 10 years old, the child has mastered all the grammatical rules of the language. The simple thing is that he doesn't know the terms for it. It is we, the people of the academy, we have given this term. This is present tense, this is past tense, and this is the agreement of the tense with the verb. This is the agreement of the tense of the verb with the subject. We call it agreement, subject-verb agreement. That man who doesn't know these things never commits the mistake in his or her mother tongue. So this is very important. So in the case of evaluation, the teacher should try to analyze what is or what are the causes of those errors, whether they are errors at all, or whether in that case particular maybe what I'm thinking to be an error, actually the student is much more brilliant. He is mastering the rules better than that. He is not memorizing the rules. So this is very important evaluation. Now, in task-based language teaching, syllabus content and instructional processes are selected with reference to the communicative tasks which learners will need to engage in outside the classroom, which I have been trying to refer again and again, and also with reference to the theoretical and empirical insights into those social and psycholinguistic processes which facilitate language acquisition. So I was talking of language acquisition. This approach to language teaching is characterized by, next slide, Subhanil. So this approach is characterized by certain features, and those features are initially an emphasis on learning to communicate through interaction in the target language. Target language is the language that which I am trying to learn. So an emphasis on learning to communicate through interaction in the target language. And next, the introduction of authentic texts into the learning situation. Introduction of authentic texts into the learning situation. I'm trying to teach them so that they can communicate in certain situations. If I have to select some text, the text should be authentic to that situation. And next is an attempt to link classroom language learning with language activation outside the classroom. So what I'm learning in the classroom, I should be able to use it in the practical field. As maybe something like what Bacon says in one of his essays, that no book actually gives you the wisdom. The wisdom is not written in the books. The wisdom lies in how you apply the contents of the book. How we apply the contents of the book, that is wisdom. Wisdom is not written in the books. Similarly, whenever we're trying to teach something within the classroom, our focus should be that the learner should be able to use it outside the classroom in the practical field, in the society, whenever he or she needs it outside the classroom. Language activation outside the classroom. Next slide. Now, Burlett and Butler, they in 1985 proposed a generalized curriculum framework which sets out 5 interdependent but distinct categories. 5 interdependent but distinct categories. I said that this curriculum, designing of the curriculum and curricular development is important. Implementation is even more important, and evaluation is a part. So they proposed a generalized curriculum framework, and those 5 categories are the designed curriculum, the developed curriculum, the enacted curriculum, the received curriculum, and the assessed curriculum. Now, the designed curriculum contains a statement of general philosophy and policy guiding the curriculum. Statement of general philosophy. The developed curriculum consists of materials and the articulation of processes. Materials and the articulation of processes which are meant to operationalize the designed curriculum. So they are intended to operationalize the designed curriculum. The enacted curriculum consists of all the transactions between teachers and teachers and learners, which are based on the materials and learning processes derived from the developed curriculum. So you can see that I'm gradually moving from one to the other. So these are gradually arranged. So the enacted curriculum consists of all the transactions between the teachers and the learners, which are based on the materials and learning processes derived from the developed curriculum. The received curriculum presents the outcomes of the curriculum processes. The outcomes of the curriculum processes, there is what actually the students have learned or may not have learned. It is not necessary the students will learn all the time. So, or may not have learned. So if the students have not learned, then we'll have to reassess. And it is often assumed that there exists a one-to-one relationship between the planned, implemented, and assessed curriculum. The planned, implemented, I've planned a thing, I've implemented it, but the final outcome needs to be assessed. So there is a one-to-one relationship. Now, an important stimulus for changing the way of teaching language came during the 1970s, when linguists and language educators, they began a reappraisal of language itself. Till the 60s, language was generally seen as a system of rules. In our country, it was continued till the late 80s as a system of rules. And the task for the language learner was to internalize these rules by whatever means were at disposal. So when we were students, we were asked to memorize and practice, and it was through a process of drill. Now, language was seen as a unified system, and the ultimate aim of the learner was to approach the target language in such a way which comes very near to the norms of the native speaker. Sorry. So the aim of us as learners, the aim of the learner was to approach the target language. Say, for example, I'm trying to learn English. So my aim was to approach English in such a way as if I come close to the native speaker. Now, the priority of the learners was to master the structures of the language, which we did during the childhood days, was to master the structure of the language. And in this process, considerations of meaning were seen almost as peripheral. We often did not try to look into the meanings. We're just trying to work out it with the help of certain techniques or rules or formula, whatever the case may be. During the 70s, a much richer conceptualization of language began to develop. Language was seen as a system for the expression of meaning, and linguists began to analyze language as a system for the expression of meanings rather than as a system of abstract syntactic rules. Linguists in the 70s, they began to study that language is not only studying the syntactic rules, rather we should try to look into the meanings also. Because until and unless we look into the meanings, we won't be able to go to this communicative approach. Now, this had a great effect on language teaching, at least at the level of syllabus design and textbook writing. When we began to change our ideas regarding language teaching, obviously we'll have to change the textbooks. So therefore, there was a change in the syllabus design also. Next slide. Now, Mary Ellen Weimer, she has done extensive research on CLT with students across different cultures. She has worked with students in England. She has worked with students in Indonesia. She has worked with students in Africa also. So she has a rich experience of working with students across continents. And she has suggested a few ingredients of learner-centered teaching. Certain features as developed by Mary Ellen Weimer. Now, she says that it is teaching that engage students in hard, messy work of learning. Teaching engages the students in this hard sorts of work of learning. It is teaching that motivates and empowers students by giving them some control over learning processes. Teaching motivates and empowers the students by giving the students some control over learning processes. It is teaching that encourages collaboration, acknowledging the classroom, be it real or virtual like this. So acknowledges the classroom as a community, but everyone shares the learning agenda. So teaching encourages this collaboration, where the students work as a community and they share the learning agenda that has been stipulated in the syllabus of the curriculum. It is teaching that promotes the students' reflection about what they learn and how they learn. So teaching promotes this. And it is teaching that excludes explicit learning skills interaction. So look at these features as presented by Professor Weimer, where she says that it is teaching that is very much responsible for the development of the skills of the students or the skills of the learners. So teaching is equally important. Therefore, it should be learner-centered, but there should be teaching. The teacher plays a pivotal role, a key role, but the teacher is not a dictator in the classroom. Teacher helps as a facilitator to promote learning to promote the acquisition of the skills. So this is very important. Next slide. Now, if we talk of the level of language theory, CLT has a rich theoretical base. And these two pioneers of applied linguistics, Richards and Rogers, they propose some basic features of communicative view of language. And they say that language is a system for the expression of meaning. System for the expression of meaning, which is very important. Language should not be read simply as a set of rules or some syntactic structures. We should try to find out the meaning. Otherwise, language fails. The primary function of language is to allow interaction and communication. The primary function of language is to allow interaction and communication. That is the basic idea of language. Language is meant for communication. Language is not actually for the classroom, where I learn something and I take the exam and I pass and I get a degree. The basic function of language is to communicate. So the primary function of language is to allow interaction and communication. And the structure of language reflects its functional and communicative uses. The structure of the language reflects its functional and communicative uses. Now, these are some of the basics of CLT. These are some of the basics. Now I'll speak about some major principles of CLT. And after that, I will, since I have time, I'll move on to, I said that I'll move on to features of language and to Chomsky's idea about language acquisition, what I've been referring to time and again, that how do you acquire a language, how do you acquire the skills. Now the major principles of CLT, it is the proponents of CLT, they say that it should be authentic language, that is, language as it is used in a real context. Such language should be used wherever and whenever possible. We should try to use the real language used by us. That means the language used by us should be authentic as far as possible and practicable. I use the term as far as possible and practicable because there are slangs also which use, but I'm not supposed to use those in the class. Therefore, the real language, the authentic language, as far as it is practicable. Being able to figure out the intention of the speaker or the writer, because it's in a classroom situation. So being able to figure out the intention of the speaker or the writer is part of being communicatively competent. I am communicatively competent, that means I will be able to understand what the other person is speaking, what he or she is saying. I will be able to understand. The emphasis in CLT should be on the process of communication rather than just mastery of language forms. So this is the major principle, that emphasis will be to develop the communication process and not to acquire the rules or the structure of the language. This mastery of the linguistic forms and rules, but being able to produce them. The learners should be given the opportunity to express their ideas and opinions. The learners should be given the opportunity to share their views, which most unfortunately we do not allow in most of the cases. But it should be a learner-centered approach. So they should be given the opportunity to express their views, their opinions. Errors should be seen as a natural outcome of communication skills. Errors should be seen as a natural outcome. Often, most unfortunately, the students are punished, rebuked, and there are other sorts of punishment whenever there are some errors committed with the students. No, this should be treated as a natural outcome. because the child is trying to develop. I'll give some examples later on when I'll talk of language acquisition. I'll just explain these things. The social context of the communicative event is essential in giving meaning to the utterances. The social context of the event is essential because I speak, obviously communicate something, and whenever I speak, it is in a situation. It's an event. So my utterance or utterances should be in conformity with the situation. It should be in conformity with the situation. Suppose I have gone to a bridal feast. My language will obviously be different than when I have gone to a place of mourning. So I should be able to express my views, my opinions, my ideas at the right place in the right way. So this event is also equally important. I should be able to do it. Now let me come back to those things that I shared, that if I have time, I'll try to speak something on, because I've simply skipped there because I thought that maybe I'll fall short of time. But since I see that I have still at least 20 to 25 minutes, then I think I can talk about the basic features of language and language acquisition, because until and unless we don't know the process of language acquisition, how the child, how the learner acquires the language, it will be very difficult as a teacher for me to understand their problems and situations. Now, I've told that it is only we on earth, only this species have got language, and language is the means of communication. I say that each and every species on earth have their own modes of communication, and our mode of communication is language. It's different. So how is language different from other means of communication, that is the animal means of communication? And I've said that we didn't develop language in a day. We have taken millions of years to develop language. So how is it different? So there are some features that actually differentiate our language, that is our mode of communication, from the animal means of communication. The most important thing is that language is creative. Language is creative. Now, what does it mean? Now, language is creative. I said that these concepts came after 1957 with Chomsky. Language is creative. This means that I can create innumerable number of sentences. Innumerable number of sentences with what? With actually finite number of words and alphabets. In linguistic terms, we say that I can create infinite number of inflectional phrases. Inflectional phrases means sentences with finite number of morphemes. Morphemes means words for general use, with finite number of morphemes and finite number of phonemes, means alphabets. For example, say in English, we have 26 alphabets, A to Z. Now, with these 26 alphabets, we create words, and the words in the language is also fixed. The words in the language, that is also fixed. That is why we have a dictionary, a voluminous dictionary by Oxford, where we have all the words of English. Almost all the words of English. Maybe those words which have just been included in the language, they are not. But it is finite. That is why we have a dictionary, we have lexicon, because lexicon is finite. But with this finite number of words, I can create innumerable number of sentences. And that is why we do not have a dictionary for sentences. Maybe if we could create 20 million sentences, then we would have got a dictionary of 20 million sentences. But we can create innumerable number of sentences. And Chomsky says that for this creativity, for this feature of creativity, Chomsky says, gives a very fine example, which has become very famous in language classes. Chomsky says that he gave two such sentences. One is, last night I had dinner with a tiger on the top of a tree or branch of a tree, something like that. So last night I had dinner with a tiger on the top of a tree. And the another sentence it gives is that read ideally furiously. And well, let me come to the first sentence. Last night I had dinner with a tiger on the top of a tree. And all of you can see that this is a perfectly grammatically correct English sentence. Last night I had dinner with a tiger on the top of a tree. This is a perfectly grammatically correct sentence. But this sentence is not acceptable. I come to it later on. The point of view where creativity is concerned is that I am sure that most of you, until and unless you had linguistics at some point of time in your master's or graduation or higher studies, you have not come across this sentence that I had dinner with a tiger on the last night I had dinner with a tiger on the top of a tree. So this is the sentence which you come across for the first time, and you have no problems in comprehending this sentence. You can understand this sentence. We actually produce many such sentences throughout the day, which I've never produced and which I'll never produce again. I come across many such sentences throughout the day, which I've never heard before, and maybe which I will never listen also again. But I can understand those sentences. So we have no problem in I think someone is to say something. Maybe I can take it after a few minutes. Okay. So I can produce innumerable number of sentences, and you have no problems in comprehending these sentences. So this is creativity of a language, and that is why Chomsky says that the grammar should be generative grammar. That means we can generate sentences, innumerable sentences, which can be understood by the speakers of the language. So this is creativity of language. This is not prevalent among the animal species. The animal species, they have particular types of sounds. For example, a dog can bark maybe in 8 or 9 ways. Whenever the dog is given some food, it barks in a different way. Whenever the dog is hit, it barks in a different way. Whenever someone attacks the child of the dog, the puppy, it barks in a different way. But that is fixed, maybe 7 or 8. If the dog can bark in 7 or 8 ways, the dog cannot bark in the 9th way. So it's fixed for them. So it's not creative for them. It's creative for us. Next important feature of language is that it is not genetically inherited. It is culturally inherited. It's not genetically inherited. That means, suppose a child of Bengali parents, the child is born in China and he grows up in China. The child will acquire Chinese much more easily than Bangla because the child is going in a Chinese environment. But he belongs to Bengali parents. So it's not genetically inherited. Because I speak Bangla is my mother tongue, it's not that my child, my son or daughter will also be able to speak Bangla. If he or she had been put in Gujarat, he or she would have acquired Gujarati much more easily than Bangla. So it is not genetically inherited, it is culturally inherited. Whereas in the case of the animals, it is genetically inherited. So a dog, if we giving birth to a puppy in Purulia, is shifted to Parish. The dog will bark in the same way it would have barked in Purulia. Going to Parish, it will not bark in the French tone. So it is genetically inherited for the animal. It's culturally inherited for us. So our language system is culturally inherited. It's not genetically inherited. Hit के दिए थे? Now, if I just let me see, okay. Now, let me move on to the acquisition of the language, because that is very much related to my CLT. How do we acquire a language? How does a child acquire the language? The child, by the time is 9 or 10 years old, the child has mastered almost all the intricacies of the grammar of his language, the rules of his language, which we call grammar, by the time the child is 8 or 9. Now, how does the child do it? I said that the child tries to incorporate these things right from his birth. And I've said that we are mainly, we mainly try to develop the 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing. So see how the child acquires the language. The child right after birth actually listens to a number of sounds, listens to a number of morphemes, listens to a number of phonemes, listens to sentences. Actually, the child listens to all the sentences that is spoken around him or her. All the sentences the child listens, but the child doesn't capture those sentences as a whole. What the child does is, the child is actually trying to locate or understand or trying to find out the phonemes or the sounds of the language. So the child is trying to understand that what are the sounds. Maybe it's paw, it's caw, it's taw, it's chaw. The child is actually listening it in bits. The child is not listening to the whole sentence. The child is actually incorporating into himself or herself those phonemes of the language. Dhoni, sheigulo she nichche. Those phonemes say, the child listens, it's paw, okay. It goes into his brain. It's like a computer. The child listens taw, it goes into his brain. The child listens chaw, it goes into his or her brain. Right? The child is only putting on these sounds, these phonemes. It's not actually taking the whole word of the sentences. It's just taking the small bits. That is the smallest bit, the phoneme. Phoneme is the smallest unit. So the child is actually incorporating all those sounds within himself or herself. And after a few months, maybe when the child is say 12 months or 13 months, it varies from child to child. Some may be at 11, some may be at 12, some may be at 13 months. The child begins to utter certain sounds. So the first process of listening has gone on. It's going on at the same time. The next process is speaking. The child then begins to pronounce certain sounds. And you will notice in all the cases, I can assure you, in all the cases, you will notice that the child, if you have some small babies at your home, or maybe some nephew or niece, or in your neighbor's house, you will see that the child will inevitably begin with, when the child begins to pronounce, the mother, the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, and all the people of the family are very anxious and keen when the child will speak, when the child will try to say something. And you will see that the child will speak either of these 3 sounds, of these 3 phonemes. Take it from me and check it. You won't have any other sounds which the child will begin with. The child will either begin with paw or baw or maw. Paw, baw, maw. এই তিনটের বাইরে কোনো ধ্বনি বাচ্চা শুরু করবে না. The child will begin with either of these 3 sounds, paw, baw, and maw. And most interestingly, and you will find in all the families this goes on. If the child says maw, the mother says, oh, the child is calling me. Because the child says maw, 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 it seems like ma, 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 ma. So the mother says the child is calling me. If the child says baw, 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 the father says the child is calling me, baba bolche. Or even if it says paw, 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 the father will say it's calling me, papa bolche. Take it from me, the child doesn't know what is mama, what is papa, what is baba. He doesn't know what is father, what is mother. The child knows that this is a person who responds to all my problems. Whenever I cry, this lady gives me milk. Whenever I feel any pain, this lady caresses me. The child responds to the stimulus. But the child doesn't know what is father, what is mother. The child is actually trying to reproduce the sounds that he or she has incorporated into his or her brain. সে প ব ম তার মাথায় ঢুকিয়েছে, অনেকগুলো ঢুকেছে, কিন্তু বলতে শুরু করছে এই তিনটে। বিকজ I give you the cause, not I linguists, because these are the sounds which can be produced most easily because these are by the two lips, po, bo, mo. So the child actually imitates and tries to produce these sounds. So in this way, gradually the child will next move on to certain other sounds, and that will be gradually moving backwards. That is so far the pronunciation is concerned. So the child, by the time the child is 2 years and 2.5 years, the child has by that time already incorporated all the sounds, and now the child begins to utter some words. And then even you will see, I just give you one more example and then I'll come to the conclusion because time is nearing. So you will see that the child will say to the mother, the child will say, khabe. Now, why does the child say khabe? The child is supposed to say khabo because the child is feeling hungry. And the child has seen that the mother is offering the feeding bottle or some food and says, খাবে বাবা খাবে কি মা খাবে, এটাই বলছে। মা বাচ্চাকে বলছে খাবে, নিয়ে খাবারটা দিচ্ছে। So the child has captured that word খাবে, and the child knows that this is something when I will get some food to eat when I'm hungry. The mother gives this and says খাবে. So the child understands that খাবে means I eat, that I will eat. The child doesn't come across the term খাবো, কারণ কি মা কখনো তাকে বলছে না যে খাবো। খাবো তো মা নিজের জন্য বলবে, বাচ্চাকে বলছে খাবে, বাচ্চা সেটা শুনেছে খাবে। খাবে মানে সে যেন আমি খাবো। So the child says খাবে. The mother understands. The mother offers food, but at the same time, as we say that mother is the first teacher. So the mother corrects the child because the child is by that time grown up a bit. It's 2.5 years old or 3 years old. The mother then says, না বাবা এটা খাবো, বলো খাবো। So the child listens that it's khabo. Khabo means for me. Forget about first person and gender and tense and number. The child understands khabo. Khabo means for me. So gradually the child will try to move on to khabo from khabe, and it will take some time. আস্তে আস্তে কিন্তু বাচ্চা খাবে থেকে খাবোতে চলে যায়। So in this way, the child is actually formulating the rules. মানে আমি হলে খাবো হব। এই যে আমি একটু আগে বললাম, I said that this is the way a native speaker doesn't commit these mistakes. I may still commit a mistake in English. Often whenever we speak, we commit mistakes in English. But I never commit a mistake in my mother tongue because it has been ingrained into my brain in such a way, it has been incorporated into my brain in such a way that it has become one with my language system. So I'll never commit error here. So the child actually internalizes in this way. So the child then actually forms the rules of the grammar within himself or herself. Grammar has come much, much later. The terms of grammar has come much, much later. But people has been speaking for millions of years. So the child internalizes the grammar of the language. So in this way, language acquisition takes place, and it's a gradual process. And by the time the child is 9 or 10 years old, the child has actually mastered all the complicacies of his or her language, which we call grammar, which we think that is very difficult. But by the natural process, the child has internalized his or her L1. We have all internalized our L1 in this way. So in this way, we learn the skills. So listening and then comes speaking. So the child is trying to produce. And much later, when the child goes into the formal classroom, or maybe after a few days, the child is asked to read, given some pictures, and then says that, okay, this is O, this is A, this is A, this is apple, and martial art comes writing. So these are the 4 skills, LSRW. These are the skills which are supposed to develop among the learners. As a facilitator of language, we are supposed to develop these skills among the learners. And that is why CLT, communicative language teaching, has become so important, has gained so importance. Right. I think I have come almost to the end, so I think it's time for me to conclude. So let me come back to my original portion. So therefore you can see that, sorry, that learner-centered role is preferable to teacher-centered role, as it more effectively promotes learning. It should be. Learner-centered role should be more profitable. Now, teachers are focused on what the students are doing instead of what they themselves are doing. So the facilitator, he or she is focused on the activity of the students. They see how students are learning, or maybe not learning. It's not necessarily all the students will learn. All the students will not learn. Because there is a famous essay by Dick Allwright, where the title of the essay is, "Why don't the students learn what the teachers teach?" Why don't the students learn what the teachers teach? We also see the same thing. In the same class, 10 students learn and 5 students do not. So this actually also allows the teachers to see what the students are learning or not learning. But learning skills they do and they do not have. And this input, that what do my students have and what they do not have, this input actually allows them to adjust teaching so that it more effectively promotes learning. So I can understand that what is lacking in them, what I should do to improve them. Just the World Cup football has ended, so we are all rather afflicted with the football fever. So I can just give you an example from the football field, right? Just think of the football coach. Think of the football coaches. When the play is going on, the World Cup is going on, they are not worried about how he has coached his players for the last 3 years or 4 years or 2 years or whatever the case may be for this World Cup. They are not worried about how they have coached. Rather, the coach observes the players, observes the situations in the field. And this focused observation actually allows the coach to offer feedback that would help the players to execute more successfully in the next match. So he is not focused on what he has taught. He is focused on how they're executing. Similarly, the teacher will also focus on that how they are performing, how their skills are developing or not developing. And the teacher will then think of his own plan, his own strategy as the coach thinks of the next match. Similarly, the teacher will also think of his own plan and strategy for the development of these skills which the students have not developed. So we might expect that teaching in higher education also has become more learner-centered. Because after this 1 hour long discussion on learner-centered teaching, we may expect that teaching has become more learner-centered. But most unfortunately, little evidence supports this expectation. Little evidence supports this. This you also know, and I also know. Okay. And next slide. So thank you for listening to this my lecture over this virtual mode for long. And I once again thank the authorities, the management, the faculty members, and the host, my dear student, Shubhranil. I thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative and thought-provoking session. We truly appreciate your expertise and the practical insights you have shared with us today. And we are sure that the audience has gained a great deal from your talk. We will now open the floor for questions and discussion. If anyone has any question regarding the topic, you can ask it. I have a question. So,
Thank God that you have a question. Otherwise, I was just thinking that either this has been too good that there are no questions, or this has been so horrible that there are no questions. So I hope this is not the second option.
no, sir, no, sir. Sir, with the increasing use of AI tools such as ChatGPT in education, how can teachers ensure the learner-centered communication remains meaningful rather than technology dependent?
Subranil, you know that I am very weak in this technological area. I'm so weak in this technological area. That is, even for today's lecture, I've asked one of my PhD scholars to arrange this setup. So I'm very weak in these things, and therefore I don't know how we can cope up with these AI things and Chat GPT and all these things, because I myself cannot use Chat GPT. I, I cannot use it. I cannot use AI tools. I sometimes ask my son to help me out. So this is an area which is just beyond my area of comprehension. I am very weak in these technological ideas, and I don't know if people use these things, how we can cope up with this. So I am really totally, totally a layman in this field for this thing.
Sir,
I'm still a backdated man.
good evening, sir. I'm Sujata from Bojreddy Engineering College for Women, Hyderabad. Okay. And I have no, actually, it's a cool lecture to get back all of us to taking back to the past, okay, because giving us introduction to the history of how language learning happened and the theorist introduced, the introduction of theorist, and then the language learning, what do you call the process, and then how child acquires its language, and then the teacher, the role of teachers, and then again how students are to be involved in the language learning process, and everything is like no, actually we are going far. I have been attending few workshops, along with this, okay, but still everybody insists on AI. But it is good to hear this kind of lecture, getting all back to the history of, I mean, little bit history, and we know now we are getting confident of using the past knowledge with the present tools, and so that we can have the whole idea. We can have the whole idea of how the transition has been taking place. No, already taken place in some institution and taking place in some institution. So it is good like to have the basic information connected with the current technology. Like it is not the basic, but the history I'm talking about. So it is a good, session, I believed. So thanks for the session, sir. That's it.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. And it is actually Hyderabad that has given me the base of linguistics, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Because
yeah. It
I have I have
center
I have
there.
been a student of IFLU, so it is Hyderabad that has given me the base. And obviously, young people, uh, they will obviously employ and include and inculcate all this technology with the basics. So obviously it's a good move that technology will be involved. It is my drawback that I'm not being able to employ these things. I am a bit backdated in these areas. I can't
But
use it.
still,
It's my
your
drawback.
lecture gives a lot of idea, like, to be confident about what we are doing right now.
Uh,
Because we can have the roots with the past and then use the current opportunities also.
Obviously,
Yes.
that is welcome. People should use it, and you people who are in the engineering colleges, basically, you will be able to use it more effectively, and it's a good move. So,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I also have another question for you. Sir, you talked about the learner-centered approach. So if you had to suggest one immediate change that every language teacher should make to become more learner-centered, what it would be?
The first change that should be done is we, the teachers, should give the students more scope and opportunity to speak, to write, and we should be patient enough to listen to them. Most unfortunately, we are not. We do not give them this scope. We are always like an authoritarian dictator in the class. This should be done away with. The students should be given the priority. We should listen to them with what they have to say. We should read their scripts, even if it is full of errors. I say errors. As teacher, we are supposed to look into the cause of the errors or the causes of the errors. So we should change our attitude, because nowadays we do not call teacher, we say facilitator. My duty is to help them. I'm not teaching them. I'm just helping them. I'm just trying to facilitate them their learning. So this attitude should be changed. We should change this attitude. This has been into our veins in such a way that the teacher thinks that I'm the authority in the class and I will do what I will do. I will say what I will say. Everybody should listen to me. You are bound. No, this attitude should be changed, because learner-centered teaching should focus on the learners. They should be given the prime importance. The first and foremost thing is that we should change our mindset. We should begin to think that no, my duty is to help them, not dictate them, not order them. And we should try to listen to them whenever they're speaking. We should try to read what they have written, read with patience, and try to analyze the errors or the mistakes. What are the causes of the errors? This is the prime thing that a teacher should do. The teacher should begin to feel that he is not a teacher, rather he is a facilitator. This is the first thing that we should begin to think about ourselves. Then only this learner-centered process of learning will develop, otherwise not.
Right. Thank you, sir. And once again, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. It has been a privilege to have you with us today.
It was actually my pleasure and privilege to be acquainted with so many teachers, though through this virtual mode, but still, I've been acquainted with so many teachers. So it's my privilege, and I thank you and your department and your authorities once again for giving me this chance to share my views and to be enriched with your views. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We sincerely appreciate your presence and contribution. With this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your presence, and thank you, sir. All right. So with this, we are ending our session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you.